created an entire community, and he's based in Canada, if I remember correctly.
Mm.
So in terms of education and art and universities and this type of stuff, it's really big in Canada.
Wow. I never knew that. I should probably look into it because I know that I see Canadian artists here and there on the timeline, but I didn't think it was to that extent.
Yeah, and I think like with tech, if you have artists, and usually when I say artists, it's revolving around entertainment industry, so games, movies, what have you. You have a lot of tech that is needed as well,
Hmm.
like software, hardware, everything, infrastructure, and all of this stuff. So I'm pretty sure you have like a lot of tech people in Canada as well who stay in Canada, I would say.
Yeah, I mean there are companies like I know Ubisoft. I don't know if it's closed, but they did have an office in Montreal.
Oh, now it's like a really bad time. Like I think last couple of days, there's a lot of headlines where all those massive companies are either shutting down entire departments or laying off a huge chunk of their workforce. Like Ubisoft, Blizzard, there's a bunch of them. Xbox even. Like now it's not a really good time for the industry, sadly.
Interesting. Well, maybe not for like those like big companies that would hire the people, but for the indie gamers, I mean, I've seen quite a few come through in the last little while that were made by like a small team, and they
Yeah,
charge like 10, 15 bucks for their game and they end up like making millions because people just love it.
yeah, I think that's the discourse nowadays. It's like this move from AAA production to more what you're saying, like indie production, which can be it's proven to be very successful in a way, um, even financially can be very successful.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that like that Pal World was one of the few that like made a lot of headlines because it was made by a team of like 3 or 5 people somewhere in like South Korea. Um,
Mm.
and they found one of their chief developers working at a corner store because they'd always come down like to get snacks while they're working in the office. And they just got to talking about the game, and then next thing you know, they hired him and then published the game, and then he was one of the 5 or few people that were in the team. And next thing you know, they're like making millions. All the top streamers are playing their game, and now they have a second one coming out.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, and I think that's with AAA production or big production, like budget, it ends up being this, yeah, like in a way, like it holds you to a certain standard because you need to make that money back somehow. And the bigger the budget, the more the pressure it is, and usually there's a lot of compromise or heads in the kitchen or chefs in the kitchen and shit like this. So
Hmm.
like with indie, you have like even I don't know if you've seen it, like Flow that came out maybe like a year or two ago, that was made entirely in Blender in a small team and a modest budget, and it went on to win an Oscar and everything. And it's like you don't need those. Having resources is amazing, but to a certain limit, like when a game costs like 450 million, that's a lot of pressure, I would say.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, just
Flow.
looking at their budget here, it's 3.5 mil, and the box office made 50 at least.
Yeah, and it's a small team. I think Flow, it's like 20 people, maybe something like that.
Wow.
Like it's a small independent team. So this, um, yeah, this approach I think is telling of what's to come in a way.
Right on. Well, before we go any further, we're live.
Mm.
So thank
Oh,
you for everyone for tuning in. Thank you for coming on, Sombra. I appreciate you taking the time.
yeah, my pleasure.
Perfect. So just to get into it, in terms of your work as an artist, how did you come by the medium of making 3D works?
How did I come about it? I mean, my background originally is architecture. So this was my first introduction to 3D in a way. it has evolved a lot since then. But I think like my first intro or first usage of 3D as a medium was back when I was studying and working as an architect, even though it was like completely different tools back then.
I see. And what made you want to be an architect in the first place? What drew you to it?
It was like, how do you say it in English? Like process of elimination in a way. Like, I don't think I wanted to be an architect necessarily. I knew I didn't want to be other fields, and architecture at the time seemed like something where it seemed creative enough that I can not be bored in that area, and it was parallel to other things that I was kind of interested in. So it made sense at the time, but that's like just the naive uh, view on it I had back then.
I see. So it wasn't something like just growing up you read an Ayn Rand novel and you were like, man, I'd love to be an
No.
architect.
No, not even. No, I wish it was, but no. It was just one of those things that it seemed like the least painful at the time thing to study. But yeah, I mean, I did it, and like I put it lightly, but it's like it ended up being 7 years of studies.
Wow.
So at one point, like you have to commit to it.
Hmm.
Um, and I kind of, so like the first 3 years, I was like very, um, how do you say, like floating about with it. Like I didn't really commit, but somewhere in the third year is when things started to connect and realizing I actually enjoy it, and I actually am not horrible at it. So I continued, and then once I finished my studies and everything, came the realization that there's no money to be made as an architect. Um, so you can't really survive working as an architect. Like this is coming from, like professional architects and even like without naming names, like one of the main guys in one of the top studios telling us like if you want to make it as an architect, you either are rich or you marry rich. So
Wow.
this should tell you everything about the industry, and it turns out to be true. Like he was right. So yeah, that was the quick realization that at least I couldn't sustain myself being an architect. So this is when you figure it out fast. So I started to deviate from it really quick or really early on. So my how do you say, my title as an architect was very short-lived, I would say.
I see. I see. And why do you think that is? That it's not a field where you can, it may not necessarily be like the most popular choice that people have going to school, but for those few that do make the choice, that do want to make a career out of it, and that do last through that 7 year program, why is it that you think there's not really a market for that kind of thing?
It's I think there's like different layers to it. The one of the main layers to it is just the scale of the whole thing, meaning that if I'm making a painting or if I'm making a personal project, it will take me 1 week, 1 month, 2 months maybe of commitment to it. But if you're doing an architecture project, that's at least 1 year, sometimes 2, 3, 4 years of commitment to a project. And if you're not making money during that time, then yeah, you need to either have someone who's financing you or something. And a lot of those project or a lot of those offices, if you want to build a name for yourself as an architect, usually you do competitions. And there's no money in competitions because you're just designing something for like 8 months and submitting it to a competition, and maybe you win, probably you're not gonna win, and you do it enough times till you start getting some recognition. So even if you look at offices like the big ones or ones that people might know by name, like Zaha Hadid or something, like I think Zaha Hadid, the first, I don't know, maybe 5 years, 7 years of having an office, they made zero money. So then how do you hire people? How do you even sustain the business and shit like this? And this is when, yeah, you need to have someone else financing it.
I see. I see. And the contests that you mentioned, are these contests that like a prospective builder would put on? Is it like something that a government would do, or?
There's different scales and different, it depends also, like, there's a lot of politics as well involved with architecture. So competitions, it will depend on scale. You can have like I don't know, like China having certain investors that have a plot of land and they want to build a proposal for the government or something to go over it. So they'll put it as a competition. Some competitions are closed competitions, some competitions are open. You can have that type of scale. You can have a pavilion as a competition. Um, so a smaller structure or smaller scale, and you can have, urban design. You can have, like, it depends on scale, but again, with those competitions, you're basically working for free because you're gonna like put in a bunch of months into a project to submit to competition that is unlikely going to get you any financial outcome in a way. But if you do it, like a bunch of times, hopefully at some point something clicks and you get commissioned a certain project, or you get invited to close competitions. So it becomes, the likelihood of making money or starting to make money becomes higher. But to get to that point, it's like an insane process.
I see. I see. So unless you join like a major company that has had a long-standing reputation as an intern or something and work your way up, there's not really any way for anybody independent in
Yeah.
that space to break through.
Yeah, and but even if if you're just starting out your career as an architect, like you just graduated or you're about to graduate, you take an internship, it's either gonna be an unpaid one or very low paid one.
Mm,
So I don't know how you're gonna be able to finance your expenses taking that on, but let's say you can and you find a way, even the entry level position at a big architecture studio, like what you're getting paid is there's no way it can cover your expenses. So yeah, like I don't know how, and I don't want to generalize, but like I don't know how people accept those positions and how they can sustain themselves taking on those positions. And at the same time, you're also like working insane hours and yeah, like on the verge of burnout.
I see. And in terms of the like the day-to-day work, what does like an average day for an architect look like? Like someone that's just starting out and working in one of these companies.
It depends. I think like a lot of industries, it will always depend on the scale of the office. So if it's a small studio, you'll need to be doing a lot of different things. If it's a larger studio, you'll be doing one thing day in, day out. So it can be drafting, it can be what have you. But if it's a smaller team, then they kind of need you to be able to do a lot of things. But there's always going to be someone informing you of the direction that you need to be doing stuff in.
Okay. And in terms of the life of a project, how does that come about? Is it just someone that like a wealthy benefactor or sports association or like a business, they come to the office with an idea, or are architects just constantly pitching to these companies about new developments that they can make?
you're always gonna have like uh, I don't think a lot of studios only do one thing. I think to survive in, like in terms of economics, you'll always have a couple of projects ongoing at the same time. And again, it depends on the scale of the studio, but you'll have a couple of like two teams doing some competitions. You'll have a team doing a commission project. You'll have a team doing like an invited proposal or something. And it depends on your network. It depends on, what you get invited to. Like, again, like with the politics of everything, like in Europe, after COVID especially, like things slowed down a lot in terms of construction, um, and the price of construction became just too big, so no one was building anything anymore. So then you had to shift to, for example, Saudi, where you had more projects, and then that died out like a year ago or something.
Hmm.
So then people had to switch now, like for the last year and a half, it's Albania. So you're always like, in terms of geography, you kind of need to be everywhere, but that's more of a larger scale project. If you're just doing residential real estate project, that's an entirely different thing. But if you're doing master plan scale projects, then yeah, the geography of it becomes like you can't escape it, you can't avoid it. You need to be able to tap into different marketplaces.
I see. I see. Okay, so they're just responding to market demands, and sometimes it centers around some kind of geographic area or a city or a country, and it just goes from place to place to place.
Yeah, I mean, and keep in mind, like what I'm saying, like I haven't worked as an architect for like 10 years now. I think it's been even more than 10 years. But since like the last 10 years, what I do, I work as a 3D artist for architects. So I make renders for them. So even though I'm not working as an architect, I still on a day-to-day basis deal with architects. So I have my ear to the ground, sort of saying, with this type of stuff.
Hmm.
So this is what I hear from them, or what the type of project that they commission me to do is like. This is the feel I got from it. This is why I'm saying the certain things I'm saying, or basing it on this experience.
I see. So when they do have these projects, why is it that they go to a freelancer like yourself? They wouldn't have someone in house that's able to do those things.
Uh, I mean, they don't have to come to someone like me or go. You have entire like it's a very niche industry, but
Hmm.
it's an industry nonetheless, which I'm part of, which is the architecture visualization industry. Um, so it's two-part answer. Why don't they do it in-house? They try because, if they can save money, then they'll do it. So if they can do it in-house, then they will and should do it in-house. But at a certain level, like especially with competitions and stuff like that, proposals and stuff like this, it used to be that a good design would win you a competition. And somewhere, I don't know, in the last 10 years, there was a shift where a good render will win you a competition. And there was this value given to images and renders, especially. And then this, when the offices like their ears perked up, and it's like, well, what we're doing in house isn't cutting it anymore because we're competing with people who are outsourcing the renders, and they're doing renders that are fantastic, and we cannot compete with it anymore. So they started to hire external people, and this formed the industry of like the modern industry of ArcVis. Because illustration, like architecture illustration, existed for a very long time before computers and what have you. When it was, you would hire someone to make a painting or an illustration of a building back then, and now you replace it with a computer in a way.
I see. I see. Yeah, because my idea of architects has always been There's that one famous image where these gentlemen are in this like 1950s office working with CAD drawings, but before CAD was obviously programmed, they would have to draw it out on these sprawling sheets of paper.
Yep.
Let me see if I can find the photo.
Yeah, it's the photo with everyone laying on the paper.
That's right.
It's
Yeah,
this
this
one,
one right
yeah.
here. Yeah.
Yeah. This was brutal. I do not miss this at
Is
all.
this something that you had to do as well?
Yeah, in university we were forbidden to use the computer for the first 3 years. Like even though you had access to it, you can technically do it on a computer. At least my school was very old school way of doing things, so they said no computers for the first 3 years. Everything is done by hand.
Wow. Because that
So
is
yeah,
certainly quite the process. I mean, especially with the bigger that you go, I can't imagine like how long it would take. Because especially if you're building like an actual building, I'd imagine like every single floor has to have one of these plans, right?
yep, yeah, but no one, I don't know anyone who does it manually anymore. Um, and I can't even think of an argument why you should or why you would do it manually, uh, especially this type of like technical drawing. Um, it's just like I don't know. It would be absurd to go into an architecture office today and see, you know, plans and sections drawn by hand, especially on larger scale, like you were saying.
Yeah, no, and I'd certainly agree with you there. I mean, if you have tools that are just much easier to use and they don't require nearly the same amount of space, why else would you bother? Especially in like a cutthroat industry like that, where your competitors will gladly turn around and try to automate or make any other process efficient.
Yeah, I mean, it's uh, pipeline is the keyword. If you can find a pipeline that saves you resource, manpower, everything, any office is gonna jump on it. You do lose a little bit of something, but it's like I can understand why they would go that route, even though I understand that you also lose something.
What is it that
But
you
it,
lose, you think?
and you lose one of the most important things about architecture, which is the design aspect of it. So in terms of pipeline, if you're building a tower that is, I don't know, like 70 floors, you're gonna have 60 repetitive floors. This is why those computer programs are good, because you don't need to draw out every single plan and every single section and whatever. You can just repeat the same thing because it's the most cost efficient. It's the easiest way to manage a project and all this type of stuff. So what you lose is I would say potentially the critical thinking side of design. Because if you're drawing it by hand, you really need to commit to it. With a computer, you can always undo shit, and this opens a loop of uncertainty and variation of the design and whatever. And let's try this, let's try that. But if you're drawing it by hand, you better commit or have something worthwhile to commit to paper, versus a computer, because it's not tangible in a way. It becomes disposable, and like that's the risk that you run into.
I see, I see. So there's a sense of intentionality that's kind of lost in that. Because why bother with having any strong conviction when you can just undo it or redo it or make any additional changes last minute?
It's easier to lose it, I would say. It's easier to lose that, yeah, commitment side of thing, or that intentional side of things. And keep in mind, like a lot of like superstar architects didn't study architecture to begin with. So like as an industry, or as a like as a way of doing things. Like if you go to an office, even today, like an architecture office, there's very little to do with the discipline of architecture, and it becomes a flattened out pipeline that you see in front of you. How do you get from point A to point Z in this case?
I see. Interesting. Now, when you mentioned that that thing about Saudi Arabia, how the project's kind of dried up about a year ago, uh, why do you think that is? Because from what I've heard, they've been, I mean, developing like crazy. One of the more famous ones would have to be the Line, which is supposed to be like a mile long or something, like
Yeah,
vertical building that extends out into the sea, which is an insane idea, nonetheless.
it's I don't know what their intention was behind all of those projects, because it wasn't just the line. There's like 1,000,010 other projects associated with Neom specifically.
Oh yeah.
And I worked on a bunch of those projects. Like I made images for not only me, like everyone I know in this industry worked on a Neom project. Um, and I have no idea what's the intention behind it. It's probably marketing, what they're marketing. I'm not entirely sure what they are trying to market. But none of this stuff, in my opinion, is ever going to be built. And I don't think that was the point of it. Um,
Really?
but the reason why it dried out, I couldn't give you like a fact, like this is the reason why it dried out. I can only make an assumption that, or an educated guess that the money dried out. Like, how much money are you willing to throw on this idea or this project? Probably someone's patience ran out who was financing it, or a bunch of people who were financing it had their patience tested and it dried out.
Hmm. Yeah, that is actually, it's kind of weird just because I do remember there's a lot of hype around the Line a couple of years ago. Some people threw out conspiracy theories about it. And there's that story going around, but I mean, just looking at their website, they have an endless slew of just all these different renders for um I mean, nothing short of fantastical buildings that I actually couldn't imagine seeing in that part of the earth.
Yeah,
Because
I mean,
yeah, go
this
ahead.
is what was paying my bills and any studio. Like literally, like keep in mind, like after post COVID, the industry like really was suffering, because a lot of projects, when I say project, I mean construction,
Hmm.
got either delayed or canceled out or whatever in most of Europe, most of Asia, in a lot of places. And Saudi was one of those exceptions where they said, we keep going. So myself and almost every studio I know and every person who works in the industry that I know of were, grateful to have Saudi clients and this project be paying our bills in a way. But I can't say that I know what the intention was behind it, or if there was, I don't know. Like there's a lot of question mark, because I deal with deadlines. Like someone comes in, we have this project, that's the deadline, make it look good, and that's where my job ends in a way. What happens after that, like most of the time, I have no idea. And all of the stuff that, the projects and what have you, a lot of it is, you sign NDAs and shit like this. So I'm left completely in the dark.
I see, I see. So you can't disclose like which ones you worked on exactly, or
I can't disclose which ones I worked on, and there's even like a lot of stuff around it. I can't disclose it because I simply don't know. Like the bigger question, like why or who or how or how much, all of those questions, like I wasn't even privy to this type of questions.
Okay. Okay, that's very secretive. Are NDAs usually like something that's associated with projects like these? Is it a common occurrence in the industry?
Yeah, so you will never, I mean, I can say this, I never published a single, so I've been doing this shit for like 10 years. I've never published a single image that I've done.
Hmm.
And the reason is simple. 99% of the stuff that I do will never see the light of day. Like almost all of it will never see the light of day. So in terms of secrecy and whatever, it's like you're working on projects that the vast majority of them will never get built, and will never get published. And those are the only cases where you can show a project, or I can show a project, is if it gets built or if it gets published. And all of this stuff, it's like, yeah, maybe in 10 years, I don't know. So I've never, like, legitimately almost never published any client projects because there's no point to it.
All right. So is this then like just a common thing in the industry as well, like where it's just a good chunk of it, if not the majority of the work, is done doing all these sketches, all these renderings, but the amount that actually go through to the production phase and then construction and then are actually finished, that's like a percentage of a percentage point.
It's a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction, but again, it depends on scale. So if you're doing residential real estate projects, probably you can publish almost every project you work on. But once you enter the master plan scale of projects, which, and especially the competition side of things, which is my specialty, then yeah, like you can, you'll probably publish one project every 5 years.
Hmm.
So that's, yeah, that's the reality of it in a way in terms of industry. But if you're working on like residential and this type of projects, then yeah, it's because the motive is different, the infrastructure is different. You have, you know, like especially with real estate, you have an urgency to get things done fast, because there's investors, there's whatever, all of this stuff. So there's an incentive to get it built and get it built fast. So once it's built, of course, you can publish it.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha. Now, little bit of a different question. So,
Mm.
why is it that so many condos these days, at least the ones that I see coming up here in North America, um, they they just feel soulless. Like just about every single one of them it looks the same. It's the same combination of steel bars and big windows. Um, Everything is a cube. There's not really any like creativity to it. Is it because, as you said, the priority is speed and getting this out there because of the amount of interest that are involved, or is it just like laziness, or they don't like hire creatives? Like what do you say that is?
Mm, it's gonna be, it goes deep in a way, and I hate this term, but it really does. Because you can look at it from different ways. You can look at it from, you know, of course you can, and like there is a lot of truth to it. Like cost, efficiency, all of those things, of course, are a huge factor that play into it. Like, and how many corners you can cut as well plays a big part into it. But you know, fundamentally, like you have the whole movements. So you have, let's say, because you're speaking like modernism and postmodernism, because if you like online, you'll always see this comparison, like back in the Renaissance time and back in, you know, whatever, like Gothic era and all of this stuff, and they'll show, you know, extravagant pieces of architecture, and they
Mm-hmm.
are extravagant pieces of architecture, and it's like, why can't we have this, and why can't, well, do you know how much it would cost to try and make something? But that's the other argument that a good design doesn't necessarily means expensive design. And like you had people like Tadao Ando, Frank Lloyd Wright, all of those architects who proven that you don't need extravagance to make a good design. But if you, especially like comparing right now to back then, also the regulations change a lot. Um, what you're even allowed to design and hopefully build evolved throughout the time. So there isn't like a short answer to your question, because it would be too easy to say because we're lazy or because this or that. And like there might be some cases where it is, but I think that's a disservice to, or a dishonest way to really evaluate why certain things are becoming more of a global trend, why we see it happen more or more often in a way. But there's still, like amazing people doing amazing designs in terms of architecture. And, if you approach architecture as a discipline, then, like the possibilities are endless in terms of what a good design is and what it could be, without having, making the comparison to Renaissance or like Baroque or Gothic or whatever architecture.
Okay. Yeah, no, I figured as much just because like housing has been a cornerstone issue in Canada for a very long time now. And living in an urban setting, I just like first of all, I'm just sick and tired of all the construction, man. I just like I get it that we got to get units built. I totally understand people need housing, but Jesus Christ, man, it's just there's a joke in Toronto. There's two seasons. There's winter and there's construction because it's a year round, nonstop. Um, but then when they actually do go up, and I see these units, like I remember I was with my mom. We were walking in our neighborhood, and we go to one of these showrooms, just like, oh, let's see, what the actual condos look like, um, that they're getting built in the area, and the salesman was trying to sell us on the fact that, oh, this is it's a European style unit, trying to say that it was small, but because it's small, it has like that charm to it. Like, okay, dude, sure, whatever. Um, he was basically trying to say, like, yeah, this isn't for a Costco family. And Costco is like a big like
Yeah.
warehouse. So, oh, so but yeah, he was basically trying to say, like, yeah, this isn't for that. Like, you'll be able to bring a bag of groceries, and that's it. It's like, man, people are paying millions for this. Like, this is nuts.
Yeah, but that's, like you get into like, and like this is a discussion I have often with people in terms of quality, and, craftsmanship, what it means to, is there any value in terms of craft? And you can apply it to art, especially, and to, definitely to architecture and whatever. It's like, where, how do you like place value? Is there even a demand for crafting anymore? And a lot of time the answer is yes, but people don't show it or don't advocate for it enough, I feel. And we can, talk about it like in how it relates to AI and all of this stuff. Because like early on when you're asking me why do architects come to you and don't just do it in-house as well, because what I do requires a very specific sets of crafting, and they don't have that. So they see the value in it, so they come to me. Otherwise, they would do it in house. Um, so the crafting side of thing is, I don't want to say undervalued, but it's like it
Not
becomes a little bit
prioritized.
tricky. Um, sure, in terms of current economics, it's not a priority. The number one question would be, can I afford it? That's usually the number one question. It's like, what can you afford? And quality or crafting, takes a back seat to the main priority, which is affordability. But there's no wonder, like, if you have a cast iron or some shit like this, it's like, okay, it's gonna be a little bit more expensive, but you buy it once and it's built to outlast all of us in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of the beautiful things about crafting. It's like it's gonna last, like in terms of sustainability, and I don't mean sustainability as environmentalist, but in terms of how long will this thing exist and function properly. But when you see modern construction, it's not built to last. So whatever you're gonna pay for it, or whatever someone is gonna buy it for, it's, well, enjoy it while it lasts, because it's probably gonna be demolished in the next 20 years.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about because I have seen there's some reels that I've seen on Instagram where a guy, he's like a house inspector,
Mhm.
and he has a channel where he just goes by these newly built homes, and just with every little detail that he points out, it just makes me like really concerned. Like, man, like people are paying top dollar to live in these places, and they're gonna need so many repairs that down the line it might not even be worth it to live in there in the first place. Like whether it's issues with water leaking, or electrical wiring, or even just basic stuff like the finishes on the floor. Um, it stuns me that there's that little care
Yeah.
kind of placed into
But
it.
this is what ties it back to what you were saying earlier, and like computer versus hand drawing versus like this commitment and the intentionality design aspect behind things, regardless of the tool. Like, you can have commitment and intention regardless of the tool, but it's easier to bypass it, and that's the risky part of it. But yeah, like in terms of modern day, whatever we see, online, that is supposed to be design or something. Like, even when I was telling you, like, those towers and 50 repetitive floor plans and all of this shit, there's a functional side, but it's all vapid. That's my issue with it. It becomes very vapid. Like, the design side of things becomes vapid. The value of it's not built to last, and it's not designed to last, and the intention is not there to last. And like, when we're studying, like, if I'm studying architecture, or if I'm studying music, or if I'm studying painting or whatever, like, one of our teachers would tell us, bring a solid reference. And when you ask them what's a good reference, it's like something that has been existing for at least 60 years should be your good reference, because it has lived enough to pass the testament of time,
Hmm.
that it's established, and that's a good reference to build a foundation for whatever you're learning, with references. But who's gonna pull those buildings or those art pieces as references, not even 30 years from now, but like 5 years from now? Everything is made that it's like, vapid. You look at it for 1 second, it's great, move on to the next. But it's not, because if you dissect it, if you try to dissect it, it just falls apart because there's nothing there.
Interesting. So this is this just like an organic, like not extension, but um, kind of a line of logic that the industry has gone like as it's responding to market forces, or do you think that there's some kind of, not a, conspiracy is not the right word for it, but like some kind of like, not forced, but um I guess like top down approach to it? Like, is this just something that's just like become normal in the architecture space, just like because people are just responding to incentives, or is there like any other thing behind it. Because I've heard like this argument made by people that part of the reason why we don't see um like an explosion of Art Deco or a revivalism of classic like Greek and Roman sculptures is just because we've we're so out of touch with that culture or those cultures and what ideals were celebrated in them that we don't necessarily value them. Like we don't have this expectation for our buildings and for our public parks and for all these things that it's also part of not just the people that are designing these buildings, but society in general. It's just not in line with what people are looking for.
Uh, I mean, the question to ask is like, because design, uh, in a lot of ways, is problem solving. Uh, so you offer a design as a solution to a problem. A good design will hopefully tackle those problems, but you have to ask what is it the problem that we're trying to address. Um, and with with architecture at least, next time you see an architect or you go to an agent or something and you talk about the project, it's like you can flat out ask them like what was the main problem that design was supposed to tackle, and this will tell you what their priority was. So if you look at the building you have open or whatever, or any building, you can look at it from the filter of what was the problem that was being addressed. And if you look at Greek or Roman, you will still face the same question. This design didn't come from nothing, it came because it was trying to solve a problem. And this with Greek and Roman, and even like Renaissance and stuff like this, there's an aesthetic to it, but there's certain values associated to it. So if you go, to like a beautiful church somewhere in France or whatever, and there's a reason why the design was made the way it was made, and it was, addressing a certain set of problems and trying to address them by design. So that would be the difference between a Greek temple and a modern stadium.
Hmm. Okay, so we're not getting a Gaudi anytime soon, then.
Uh, have you been to Barcelona before, or just out of curiosity?
I don't know if that is the name of the building that you're referencing. Is it not the church, right? Or which one?
No, like I'm in terms of Gaudi, like Barcelona is like it's like Gaudi land. You can look
Mm-hmm.
anywhere and there's probably gonna be something designed by Gaudi. No, but I'm speaking in general, like if you look at this building, you can be in awe of a lot of things about it, but one of the provocative ways of looking at it is like, what were they trying to solve? What problems were they trying to solve? How did this design came about? Why did it came about? And then those choices will start to make sense, or those, articulations will start to make sense. Versus if you look to, you know, any modern day stadium, the design aspect of it is fair to solve a whole other set of problems.
Well, from what little I know about Gaudi, I think it was a mental illness for him. So I think that's the problem that he was trying to solve. And he went about it brilliantly because his works are well, at least this one, the La Sagrada Familia, is still getting worked on from the last time that I was there.
I
Um,
mean, I can give you a small tidbit of filter, like a lens that you can look at architecture through that is very useful. You can generally split things into two camps: the form follow function or the function follow form. And depending on which one it is, it's gonna, you know, like most designs will fall under either the form was following the function or the function was following the form. And in some weird cases, you have like a weird in between. But generally speaking, like those are the main two categories that you can look at it.
I see. So that's like a good rule of thumb for any
Generally,
architecture. Yeah.
I think generally, yeah. And even like when I say, form follows function, you can think of a hospital, of course, that, one of the priorities of a hospital is to be functional. So the design, you know, around the function will take priority over what the exterior shape of the building is. But if you look at, like a church or something, you can say, oh, but it is a forma, expression, but it's like, no, there is a function side of, the scale of the church is there to make, the person entering be small in the kingdom of God, and the scale of the divinity and all of this stuff. Those are, it sounds fantastical, but those were legitimate, you know, problem solving. Like this was a
Hmm.
legitimate function of the church and the religion and ideology back then. So it ties back to the function of the space as well. Um, so yeah, like the form and function things of design, like the discourses of them, it's like you can get lost in it. But it's a good way to, like, as a general filter, you can generally classify things into those two camps.
Yeah, that's definitely a useful way of thinking of it. Now, this kind of this disconnect that we've been kind of been talking about between um, having designs that like stand the test of time or responding to market incentives. Do you think that there's a possibility that in the future we're going to see a revitalization of um, some kind of like a creative spirit to make things that aren't just, you know, square buildings and like that all look the same? Do you think that maybe that with automation and AI, it's going to be a lot easier to make those things
Jesus
possible because
Christ.
now you don't have to deal with um like construction crews. You can have like robots come and build it, because I know that there's one company called, I think, Monumental Labs. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they essentially make
No, I'm not.
they um they make these busts and all these different marble sculptures um with CNC machines. Now they finish them off by
Hmm.
hand, so the initial carving is done through automation. And they actually just got a contract to build what was it? Yeah, the Vatican Museum in America. Now this is obviously AI generated, but their idea is to kind of bring that entire style over to the United States and help revitalize that spirit, not just through this project, but through like all their endeavors. Do you think that that is a
So
way of bringing that back, or?
I hope not. I sincerely hope not. I don't know if this company, this is the first time that I've seen it, and I like, to be fair, it's a very, first glance type of reaction to it. But the previous image you had open, it's like it's disheartening for me personally, and it's like you're you're trying to. It's very it's shallow. Like I see it as very shallow because you're borrowing an aesthetic and somehow pushing it on the consumer level, and you have like the America, and like this is it seems very shallow to me. So I hope that that's not the future. Because when you were talking about it, and I'm really curious, like in terms of the language of it, it's like AI would solve a problem, or it will, make it easier to deal with X, Y, and Z and all of this stuff. But it's like, why are we delegating something that, you know, it's not difficult to do those decisions. It's not, it's more time consuming perhaps, but it's worthwhile in a way, because what's the point of delegating it to AI? And I know I'm being very vague with even the term AI, but it's like what's the purpose? What's the point? Why are we doing it? Is it because it's easier? Is that the core reason behind it?
Yeah, I don't really know what would be the direct answer to it, because I was just thinking, like, if we are to not return to a time, but like revitalize that spirit um of making public works and projects that people can not only be like proud of and have in their city, and so that it doesn't just look like
Mm,
every other building beside it, um but something that does have like a new style to it, so that we're not just rehashing old ideas. I was just thinking, like, what would it take for a market like architecture globally as it stands right now for it to shift to something like that? And
but
I
here's the thing, even when you're saying to bring new ideas, to bring new aesthetic, to bring, but at the same time, the image we have open, it's a image, of a Greek and Roman. It's a very, like, I hate to be that person, but it's like a very simplistic image of those ideas from the Greek and Roman style. Um, so on one hand, it's like we want something new, we want something valuable, we want those, but we're showing something that is like a bad replica of something from the past. This is why, like, this image, like, I know it's like very nitpicky, but it's like it threw me off completely. This one image, because it holds a lot of, and again, like, to be fair, I don't know this company, so maybe this is an outlier or whatever, but my knee-jerk reaction to it, it's like this, it's like when you ask me, do you hope this is part of the future? I'm like, I hope not, because I think we can do much better than that. I would hope we can do much better than that.
Yeah, no, that's a fair reaction to have. And I'd imagine that this is just like a simple rendering that they put up just for the sake of the announcement. I don't think this is actually exactly what they want to build. I don't know exactly what the plan is because this was announced. Oh, actually, I just realized. Oh
Mm.
my God, this is posted on April 1st.
Okay, then there you have it. Like this,
uh,
if it's a joke, then that's a good thing.
I can't believe I got bamboozled for that. I thought this was actually legit. Wow, that's funny.
But this opens, like with AI especially. Like there's a really good book by Edward de Bono called Simplicity, and one of the reasons I really like this book is he defines simplicity, but also makes a distinction between simplicity or simple and simplistic. Um, and with a lot of the AI stuff that's out there, and when I say AI, I specifically mean generative AI, like the picture you had open, it's a simplistic representation of something, of ideas. Um, and simple is beautiful. Like if you can have a simple design, then you achieve something amazing. Because to make something simple inherently, like, it requires a certain level of mastery, because you can take complex ideas and present them in a simple way. So it requires a deep understanding of the topic that you're bringing forth. Simplistic, on the other hand, is a naive approach. It's like it's like explaining something without an understanding of it, so it comes out simplistic. And I think this distinction is very important between simple and simplistic. And with generative AI, like, for me, sadly, like, a lot of it falls under this simplistic filter, because it's taking complex things, but it's showing it in a very naive way. And it can be charming, like, there's some qualities to it. It can be charming, but yeah, that's a little bit of a ramble.
Yeah, because there is a distinction in that, between the two words. It's hard to think of because they sound so similar, but I do see what you're saying there. Um, that there is a certain beauty to simple design because it doesn't try to uh, make it look as it's covering all the bases of form and function. It's just covering enough without adding any extra like layers to it or making it complicated for the sake of making it complicated. And there's a certain
Yeah,
beauty in that.
yeah, that's like in terms of design at least, that's generally like a good path um, to take or aim for. And it's a very hard one, uh, but it's a good aim, I would say. And the worst thing, what you were saying, like that's like one of my biggest pet peeve is like this, and that's the academic side of thing. It's like complicating thing for the sake of making it complex because then it sounds sophisticated or it
Hmm.
sounds deep and whatever, but if you dig into it, there's nothing. Like there's nothing to it. It's just decorative bullshit around it that makes it seem, so a lot of time I'm very worried around people who celebrate complexity or dress things in a way that is overtly complex because at least in my mind, like with academics and whatever academia, it's like if you're very confident in your knowledge about something and your mastery about something, you'll actually, most of the people will show it in a very simple way because they can do that, which is very difficult. But if you don't have, that mastery or that whatever, then you can try to hide it behind complexity.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I encountered that myself in my time in university.
Mm.
When I was studying, I would like, I don't know, just do readings or go to lectures, and half the time sitting there, I'm thinking like, okay, well, all those words that you just used in that sentence, you could have just used three to explain that. And I
And
understand
most
that.
of us are guilty. Like most of us are guilty of it, Like I've done it in the past because it was, it's too tempting. It's very tempting to do it because it's very rewarding as well. And there's this, like associated value to it that, if you're using, especially in academia, if you're using big words or making, the most complicated paragraph in terms of linguistics that you must know what you're talking about. And most of the time it's like, no, we're trying to hide the fact that they don't know what we're talking about. This is why we're distracting with those techniques and this type of shit. But I mean, we've all done it at one point or another because it is tempting to do it, but it's not. If you're gonna aim for something, this is why again, like the simplicity, like simple and simplistic distinction, um, comes to play and becomes important. And even like there's a lot of words that we just throw around, like even creativity, like especially like during studies and shit like this, like all of us, we heard this word a million times, like you need to be more creative, or someone would compliment you and say, oh, this is very creative, but no one defines it. And when you because it's not an easy thing to define, but once you actually define those words, it makes a lot of things more clear in a way.
Yeah, no, I certainly understand what you're getting at there. I see it quite a bit in the art space, especially like whenever I go to a show or anything. Just some of the conversations that you'll hear from people. It's like, well, there's not really any need to dress this up. I mean, it's the the work kind of speaks for itself. And no, I get that other side of it too, as you say. Like it's just it's far too easy to fall in that trap, especially when you're trying to impress someone.
But
Um,
it's so
yeah.
obnoxious.
Oh
It's
yeah.
so obnoxious.
Yeah.
Like once you see through it, like especially if someone is not that good with this game, it becomes such a turn off. Like it really becomes such a turn off.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to give that book a look. That seems quite an interesting read there.
The good thing about this book is that it's basically a guarantee because you cannot write a book called Simplicity and have it not be simple. So if
Hmm.
anything, like you're getting what you paid for with that book. And any of his books, because, imagine if you wrote a book called Simplicity, then, in the book, it turns out it's not, it's a mess, and it's overly complex and whatever, and it's a burden on you for anything you write after that point, but it needs to abide by the principles that you lay in that one book. This is why I like him as an author in general.
Yeah, I'll definitely be sure to add it to my list. That definitely sounds like quite a read. Because yeah, I mean, like even when I see like people talking about the crypto space or like NFTs and whatnot, I get that same kind of feeling. It's like, man, I don't have time to sit down and read this white paper. I need someone to explain this to me, so like even an idiot like myself could understand. And I understand like there's certain things in that space that do require that technical know-how, so you obviously do need to have a level of complexity there. But some of the talk about it, I'm just like, man, I don't want to zone out like 30 seconds into the conversation. I just want to get to the meat of it.
Yeah, some things for sure are, especially with like technology. Like if you talk to me about coding and shit like this, it's like magic for me. It's like alien talk. It's like I
Hmm.
I can't follow. Uh, and this type of complexity is not a bad reflection, because sometimes some topics or some, like I'm reading, like there's a book, I think I read this book, like I'm on my fourth read of the same book, and I love this book, but it's an extremely complicated book, at least to on my level, to understand and to tap into. And it's not because the author is trying to, be overtly self-indulgent in the language and whatever, but because it's such a deep topic that he's trying to talk about, that there's so many links and so many references that he needs to establish. So you're trying to make a million new connections to topics that I don't know about, or I'm not familiar with them. So it gets overwhelming and it gets all those things. So there is a place, like I'm literally on my fourth read of this fucking book, and I'm like, every time I pick it up, I'm like, I this is definitely not the last time I try to read this book.
Hmm. Yeah, and I know the feeling. I totally get it. Um, but going back to that question of seeing that the market and the production of architecture, what do you think would be the path forward if there was a transition to be made, um, to something that doesn't necessarily have to like resemble what's come from the past, but something that makes it new and exciting and gets the public to actually buy into it and want to have things that stand the test of time, that aren't cheaply built and not just mass manufactured?
I mean, the honest answer is that I don't know. Um, I don't know what it would take, and I don't know, if it's even possible, or if there's a form of it. Like I can't even start to, because I don't. Also, in fairness, like I don't invest a lot of time in that area or that way of thinking, because I'm, again, like with architecture, like I haven't worked as an architect for over a decade. Uh, so I'm a little bit out of touch of the nitty gritty of it. Even though I'm working in something parallel to it, I'm just out of the loop with it and where it's heading, what's the discourse, all of those things. But if I see something, I can have a reaction to it. If I see a certain direction, then I'm like, yeah, that's probably not gonna be it, type of deal. But like in terms of answer, like the honest answer is that I don't know.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, there's not really any way to guess where it's gonna head, and all people can do is just, I don't know, keep working at it, and maybe eventually we'll see a revitalization of it. But moving
Yeah.
forward, what did that transition going from being in school as an architect to 3D modeling and art, all the art that you do now. What was that like for you?
Mm, I mean, the first thing is like uh, when it happened, like my interest in art, or even my interest in even attempting, uh, like having my stab at it and shit like this came much later. Because I know there's some people, that like they knew that even if they didn't have the words or they didn't, fully grasp the magnitude, they're like, this is something I want to be doing in some shape or form at an early age. This was not the case for me. Like this came to me in my early 20s type of deal. Um, so the first inclination to it came from photography initially. Like I was very admire or I had a big admiration for street photography specifically. Um, and that lent its way to saying, okay, so, with architecture, I've spent all this time and energy into trying to learn certain things, and I love street photography. How can I combine those two interests together? And this is where rendering came to play and 3D came to play. Um, and especially with 3D, like I have an obsession with realism. So combining all of those things were how I got into 3D. But this is has nothing to do with art in a lot of way because it's very like for me, it's like there's a distinction between like fine art and it's like linguistics and it's very nuanced and all of this shit, but I would never categorize what I do for clients in terms of 3D as art, if that makes sense.
And why is it that you think that you make that distinction? Because at least from my perspective, I mean, just about anything that people make uh, is art. I'm not.
For me it's the intention that's very different. Like my approach and my intentions behind what I do, because again with clients there is artistic qualities in what I do, but at the same time, I'm problem solving something external. So I'm solving a problem for the client in this case. So it doesn't mean it doesn't have any artistic qualities, but I
Mhm.
wouldn't be comfortable in saying that just putting a blank statement saying that it's art per se, because the intention is not there when I'm creating it, when I'm making those images and the whole like there's not a second spent thinking of artistic value in whatever it is that I'm creating, because that's not the point of why I'm making those images. It's not about me, it's not about the image, it's about the client,
Mm.
and I can hopefully direct them in a good direction, but even I have no final say in the matter. I don't even have ownership over what it is that I'm creating because, again, it's someone commissioning my time to give them a product, so it becomes a product versus what I do on my own time. So, my personal projects, it took a while, but now say, I can speak of them as art pieces a lot more comfortably. And this took a long time to get to that point as well. Um, but yeah, so I put a distinction between commercial work, at least in my case, and personal projects. So my website, the one you have open, it's all personal projects. There's no client projects there. And this is my playground in a way.
I see. I see. Okay, I understand the distinction. Yeah, because with the client's orders, there's only so much amount of leeway that you have with the creative output because they set a certain amount of parameters and limits on what needs to be done. And at the end of the day, for you, it's just the client wants this. Well, that's what the client's gonna get.
It's way too many compromises. There's so much compromise in client work that, yeah, there's like by the end of it, by the time it's done, and wrapped and sent, and I sent my invoice and everything is in the clear and all of this shit. Like, if I look at those images, I'm like, yeah, like a good percentage of them, it's like they're not even the direction I would have ultimately wanted them to be, to go that way. But, you know, why do I make those images? Those images are there to sell a project. That's the point. Why do I make my personal projects? Well, it's completely different. It's not trying to sell someone else's project. I can tell you that much.
Gotcha, gotcha. And in terms of working with these commissioned clients, not asking for obviously details because you mentioned with the NDAs and whatnot, but I've heard that some artists, or at least people that work in the design space when it comes to corporate design, um, that there's a lot of like back and forth with the client. That initially your whatever it is that you present to them first gets redrawn so many times that it's almost indistinguishable. Or sorry, it's almost impossible to tell what the initial design actually looked like because of how many changes have been made and the strict demands that they have and all that.
Yeah, but I don't hold that against them. I'm not saying it as a negative. It happens, but I understand why it's happening. And it's not because we're shitty clients, it's not because we're idiots. We're far from it. It's just I can understand why certain choices are making. I can understand why when I see my image, they boosted the contrast to 100% and the saturation to 100%. I hate it, but I understand why they're doing it. That's the difference. And of course, like there's a lot of changes and all of this stuff, and you make something and it becomes something else by the time it's done.
I see. I see. Okay, that makes sense. And I'm guessing that part of your schooling there, you guys had to learn Blender at one point, and that's where you picked it up.
No, I'm much older. I'm to be clear, I'm 35 years old. So Blender, you know, I'm I'm jealous and envious of the new generation. But back then there was no Blender really, and definitely not in the current shape it is. So back then, like Jesus Christ, well, in terms of rendering and in terms, because that's especially what I do is just renderings. Really, it's 3ds Max and V-Ray was the industry standard when I entered the industry, and it still is to this day in terms of ArcViz at least.
Let's see. Yeah, I mean that program
3ds
doesn't
Max
look too
is like
old.
an ancient 3ds Max is ancient and it's a garbage software, but we have to use it. Garbage in a sense that like Autodesk stopped developing it ages ago and just repackage it and sells it every year after year, giving you the same thing with zero updates to it. This is why I'm saying it's a shit program. So even though I'm saying like I'm using those softwares and whatever, you're better off using Blender.
Gotcha. And after having worked the software and once Blender came out, you just simply jumped on it because it was just much easier to work with, a lot more intuitive, and also free.
Which I haven't switched to Blender. Because I'm also like starting to have this, old dog, new trick type of shit happening.
Hmm.
Because I've been using 3ds Max for so long that I'm just used to it. Um, and like whatever time I have to learn, if I'm gonna learn a new software or something, it wouldn't make sense to learn Blender. But in terms of like what I do, which is 3D work, I'm expected to use Max and V-Ray. And also because I work with clients, but I also work, in music where you have like ghostwriters.
Hmm.
I'm the equivalent of that in many ways for the art biz industry. So a lot of the clients that I worked with are other studios, um, that are not architects. They are just, art studios that hire me kind of as a ghostwriter for them. So I need to have like common softwares that they use and all of this shit. And 3ds Max and V-Ray are just the go-to for most of them.
I see. I see. Okay. And in terms of moving into Blender, because I see most of the work that you have here, or at least in the Mundane collection, are these all Blender too?
None of them are Blender. All of them
Oh,
are 3ds Max. So all of them are 3ds Max and V-Ray. Some of them have a little bit of Plasticity 3D, which is like a 3D modeling software. And some of them have some Marvelous, which is like a fabric simulation thing. But like 90% of it, it's all 3ds Max and V-Ray.
I see.
So it's all renders basically.
Yeah, because like looking at them, I half the time I couldn't tell if these are just still photos that you took, but like as the designs got more and more inventive, I was like, yeah, I don't think anybody took the time to actually make this.
Yeah, and this is why I love 3D. It's it's convenient because I don't need to. I mean, I don't even know where you would begin to make this type of shit in real life. Like like you would need so many resources. Um, and yeah, like they only exist as an image at the end of it. Like they're they're made, all of this time and effort goes into just making an image, and that's what they are. But no, it's all 3D and just rendering. Like even the post production is almost non-existing in most of them.
I understand. Okay. And what was it that inspired this series here, or is it just this is a collection of random things that you've done?
No, so this is a very intentional series. I think now it's been over 2 years that I'm like building it, or make growing it in a way. The main motivation, I would say, there's a main reference. That's an easier way to explain it, even down to the title and everything. Like the main reasoning behind it is, like some years ago, a friend gave me a gift, which was, do you know the author James Joyce?
Sounds familiar, but inform me.
So like James Joyce is considered to be like a literature giant, basically. Um, so a friend of mine gave me a book from his called Dubliners, which is like one of his lesser known books, I would say. But anyway, so I got this book, and it's a very short book of short stories. And I started reading the book, and I thought it was the most boring thing I've ever read. And that was very arrogant and very silly of me. And luckily, like I had, so I read the book. I didn't get it. For me, it was the most boring book I've ever read. And then, you know, there's a reason why this author is considered to be one of the best literary giants and authors and writers and whatever. So it's not because it's a boring book. It's just there's something that I didn't understand about the book, that it didn't connect or didn't click, and it's not because it's boring. So I tried to give it another read, and during that read, something unlocked for some reason, because I was like also making a serious effort in reading it and to trying to understand why he is a master of his craft. And in the second read, what unlocked is that what I was thinking is boring is actually the mundane quality of the stories. And the fascinating part with him and that book in specific, because it's short stories, is that so he would start a story and it's the most banal, regular story, whatever, but there's always an undertone of tension or violence, something bubbling under the surface. And just when you're about to uncover that thing, the story ends and he moves to another story. And he builds up that tension again, but never reveals it. So if you just read it on the surface, it's just, silly stories, very banal, everyday type of stories. But this quality of this underlying violence that's under this mundane surface is what I found to be fascinating. So fast forward, so I read this book like maybe 9 years ago or something like this. Um, and when I started, because with 3D and with the stuff that I do, because again, like I started this series like 2 years ago. So there's a big gap of me not doing it. Because most of the time when I was showing my personal projects, what I was creating is digital painting, which is completely different. And the reason I didn't do 3D work is because I didn't see anything that I can create in it that would be interesting for me, or that would have any merit or value why I would put time into this. And this was the first time where, in terms of thematics, it connected. I had a clear idea of, oh, those are the themes I want to address. This is the way I want to do it. This is why I want to do it. And all of those questions started to have answers. And now, like the last 2 years, I became obsessed with this idea of the mundane, like mundane objects, and trying to capture very specific thematics. So in terms of like erotic or violent or melancholy, those sentiments or those ideas, trying to find objects that can capture them without being on the nose, and at the same time stripping anything that is fluff or decorative, just so showing things as raw as possible that capture a certain sentiment. That was the intention, and that's the reference. I went on for too long for it, but
No, no, by all means, this is what the space is for, to have this dialogue and for you to explain it fully. Um,
so like the book at first glance, and this is kind of by design, like this is the worst project for anyone to do in terms of visibility, or if you want to get attention or whatever, because they're made to be mundane. The same way I disregarded the James Joyce book saying it's boring, and I'm not even trying to compare it, but it's like those are made to be, just something I doubt, like most people will just glance at it and it's like, yeah, whatever, and just move on. By design, even the title, it's made to be mundane. It's made to have this mundane presentation. But under it, there's like, if someone wants to dig deeper, um, then hopefully, if I'm successful with any of it, is that they will find something. But it rewards the people who want to dig a little bit deeper into it. It's like, why would this guy spend all this time and energy into modeling this shit and rendering this shit and putting thought and effort into it? Like, there must be some type, at least if someone gives me the benefit of the doubt, like they can dig a little bit deeper into it.
yeah, I get what you mean. Besides the collar piece here, just about everything else has that quality, as you say, that it's mundane on the outside and you can just scroll by it without giving it a second thought. But if you spend a little bit more time thinking about the themes and just trying to look for um, not a hidden quality, but something that's not expressively stated right in your face, that there's something to be found there.
Yeah, and some of them I think are more successful than others, but it's always the same intention. Like each one of them have, like I approach them with the same intention every time.
And so, in this series here, would you like say that it's complete, or you still have pieces that you're working on publishing for it?
I'm still working on it. I'm like I haven't, since I started working on it, I think like till now, it's been over 2 years, I still keep digging deeper. Like I still find, because that's the thing. Like the thing that ties it all together is thematics. That's the core essence. That's the main thing that interests me about the series. It's all about thematics, and the themes that I'm dealing with. Like you can, at least for me, like it's an endless pit. You can always dig deeper, and you'll find something. So when I'm reading or I'm researching or whatever, I keep finding um, new ideas that bring with them certain provocation. That's like, oh, maybe if I do this, or a certain image will come to mind. And once I have that figured out, then I can make the piece.
I see. Have you come across any other books that are similar to what James Joyce has written for inspiration, or are you just using that as the kind of the background for it?
No, so James Joyce, like I haven't even read it again, because I just love my memory with it. I don't think I need to read it again. But there's definitely, like, in terms of like thing, the main book that I'm reading, that it's like an endless source of inspiration to this series. It's there's a French author called Georges Bataille. He has a book called Erotism, Death, and Sensuality. And it's a book about erotism, but specifically taboos. Um, and he approaches it from a very academic point of view. Like, and it's this is the book I mentioned way earlier on into the conversation, but it's the fourth time I'm reading it, and I still barely can keep up with it because the themes he's. Let's see, wait, the link you have. Yeah, that's one. Yeah, that's one. Because the themes, that he's trying to explain and the connections that he's trying to make are really rich, and they go, you know, very deep as well. And yeah, so this is one of the books like that is an endless source of education. Not really inspiration, but definitely education on those specific themes.
Yeah, I can't say I've come across it, but I'll certainly add that to my list too. Because
Josh Bataille, he has like this book is like I wouldn't advise it to anyone, honestly. Like unless you're very keen in that very specific topic, then go for it and good luck with it. But other than that, like you can just skip it. He has another book called Literature and Evil, which is also like equally amazing, a lot shorter, and he discusses basically authors that were either considered evil in their time or wrote about the topic of evil. And it's a very short, brilliant, well written book about him. If you're interested in his way of writing, this would be a much better introduction, I would say. But yeah, Georges Bataille is probably one of my favorite authors in terms of literature. He also writes his own. It's not always analytical. Those two books are analytical. He also has his own story called Story of the Eye, which, also is a big inspiration and reference. So for me, anything from him is gonna be worthwhile.
sounds good. Yeah, I'll get started on this one and see if I make it through the end, and then maybe I'll have my try at the
I mean,
erotism
literature and
book.
evil, it's very simple. If you ever read or were interested in authors like Marquis de Sade, Kafka, Baudelaire, any of those authors, William Blake, if you were ever interested in their writing, this is probably my favorite analysis of those authors. Because again, like Georges Bataille is for me like one of those giants in terms of literature. So anything that he communicates would probably take me 10 lifetimes to even try to connect together. And he just gives it to you. So, this is why I really appreciate those books. So, Literature and Evil definitely is a really great analytical book.
Okay. That's about as solid a review as I needed. I'm always looking for new books to read, so well, yeah, I'll
It
definitely.
even has almost like 4 stars out of 5, which is kind of impressive.
Yeah, for modern audience especially, you'd think it
Yeah.
wouldn't be that high. Yeah, that's interesting what you said about the James Joyce piece there, because yeah, I've also come across like certain just texts that um there's just something about it that doesn't resonate with me, and it just looks plain as an outsider. And I encountered quite a bit of this when I studied in the English literature program at university. That because of we were studying like Old English, like Beowulf, Shakespeare, obviously, but any of the other kind of like poets of that time. From the outside looking in, without like the proper context to really understand the value or the sentiment behind what was being written, um, it was just really, really, really hard to connect with, and I hated it half the time because I'm just like, man, I know this is written in like another version of English. I get it. I don't live in that cultural context, but I wish there was like some kind of like a modernization that they couldn't have done or could have done to it, um, to at least like bring it to the future. But then when I actually started getting like higher advanced courses in that field, as I talked more and more to my professors, I realized that no, like there's no need to kind of modernize it or simplify it. It should exist as it does within its own context. But when you actually learn more about uh, whether it's a time period or all the unique ways of translating these different words, I realized there was just a complete other world to what was being written on the page that I just wasn't seeing because I just didn't have all the prerequisite pieces of understanding. And the moment that I did, I was like, "Oh, this is like this is actually I understand the beauty behind it. I understand the sentiment behind it. And I understand the value of learning this." But it wasn't until like years later, like I touched on Shakespeare in high school, as just about every kid does, but like I hated it. I hated it, like having to memorize memorize the monologue or write any sonnets or anything like that. And it wasn't until I got all those other pieces of context later in life, I was like, oh, there's a beauty to this. There's a beauty to this that I missed initially.
Yeah, and sometimes you just don't connect with something, and that's fine as well. Like it doesn't always have to be, like one or the other, but when it happens, when those things happen, I think like there's like immense beauty to it when you can finally unlock something and figure out, what you're saying, like the beauty or the value in it, or all of those things, and it adds a lot of enrichment to whatever you're doing. And in my case, 7 years later, it connected to something that I'm like doing obsessively or working on obsessively. So
Yeah, right on. And just to pivot a little bit here, with your digital paintings here, is this also part of a single series, or is it just a collection of all your works?
this is just a collection. Because I was saying, like I was, even though I've been, as a like my day job, day in day out, is doing 3D every day basically for the last 10 years. I was never really doing personal projects for it. And my escape from it was actually doing digital painting. So I've been showing the digital painting stuff for a lot longer, especially online, than I've been doing, showing my 3D stuff. The 3D stuff is relatively new, I would say, versus the digital painting, like I've been actively putting it out there and building on top of it and whatever, for I think, yeah, like 2015, 2014 is when I started it. But those are just like a collection of paintings that I've done throughout the years.
I see. Yeah, and in terms of inspiration, because I see a lot of it is focused on uh, human body figures and organic kind of shapes. Is there any particular reason why you kind of stuck with that?
It's yeah, I'm yeah, like in terms of again like thematics and whatever, I'm always like I'm a hammer that is hitting the same nail over and over and over again. It doesn't matter what if it's 3D or 2D. Um, w- Back then I was calling it, like I was interested in portraits specifically as a starting point, and figures and whatever, and but in terms of themes, like for me, it was always about melancholy, like trying to capture melancholy on at a certain capacity. It was like this project. It was more like a abstract, like diary or series that I was doing, like whatever on a day I decide to paint something or start a piece or something, whatever I was feeling on bad days, what would be the final piece. Because the difference between, I can put it this way, with 2D painting, I never have an idea before I start. I'm always starting on a blank canvas and figure it out as you go, type of thing.
Mm.
With mundane and 3D, it's the complete opposite. I'm not opening the 3D program until I have the final fully fleshed idea in my mind and in my head. Then I'm just executing it at that point.
Hmm.
And with digital painting, it's the opposite. I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no plan, no agenda, no anything, no idea. Just sit down and whatever comes out at the end.
That's an interesting way to go about it. Um, but I guess yeah, there's a bit more intentionality that would be needed with like 3D rendering because I mean just with the amount of time it takes to make
Yeah.
that scene and everything. Like I've only dabbled in the tutorial. I don't even think I ever finished that Blender donut tutorial, or maybe I did. I just can't recall. But even just doing that, I was like, man, this is insanely time consuming, and I'm sure that it gets easier over the years. But yeah, this is not something that I can just like pick up like a sketchbook and just do a little
It's not
doodling.
even bad as a medium. It's very unforgiving. So, like for me, 3D is the worst place I want to go to sketch. It's really the worst place. It's the least intuitive. At least 3ds Max is the
Hmm.
least intuitive place because you're moving vertices basically. So whatever flow you have gets destroyed by tapping out of it and worrying about vertices and planes and normals and all of this shit and continuity and all. So as a medium, I never found it a good medium to sketch out ideas in. This is why I only approach it if the idea is already finished in my head. If I have like I know exactly what the final image will look like, because then I can just execute it. I can model it, texture it, render it. I'm done. It's just execution. In 2D, it invites you to sketch literally. So it's like the medium lends itself to exploration, and you don't need to come ready with something. You can, of course, but for me, it's like if I wanted to do that, I'll do it in 3D. So 2D offers this new approach of creation or creating something where I can have nothing in front of me, and in an hour or two, I can have something.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense. And speaking on mediums, do you think that you would want to branch out into something different in the future? Is there anything you have an eye on, or with the amount of stuff that you have on your plate currently, this is good. This is good enough for your expression.
No, the like funny enough, like 2D and 3D and all of this stuff is like if I look realistically at the stuff that I'm doing on my personal time, writing is probably the one area that I'm the most consistent, and yeah, I would say the one area I've been the most consistent at is just writing. And this is where all of the other stuff comes from, like the mundane and all of those projects and even the 2D stuff. So in terms of medium, I would say writing is definitely one of those mediums that I'm very rarely do I show it, but I'm always building it. Music is another one that I've been like throughout the years slowly showing more of it, and collaborating with other artists where I can, let them worry about the visuals and all of this shit, and I can just do my music and just give them that, and that's a fun way to do things. Those two, and yeah, I think that's basically the main, I would say, writing, music, 3D stuff, and 2D stuff would sum it up.
Right on. And so for music, do you actually like play any instruments yourself, or is it just all like
Yeah,
garage band?
no, a lot of it. So if you go like first, I think the one down to the right, like with Ushi, yeah, with Ushi like this, like piano is my main go-to usually instrument. And throughout the years, I became a little bit too obsessed with synthesizers. So I made the transition from just piano to more synthesized music and synthesizers and electronic side of things. So drones and whatever. And but yeah, no. To answer your question, like it started with piano and it moved and morphed into synthesizers basically.
Gotcha, gotcha. So no
So on
no
that
AI music
portion,
yet.
yeah, I doubt you will ever see me like like I'm. It's not for me personally. I can put it that way. It's not for me because like there's like with the AI stuff, there's no. That's also like the weird thing. There's no, at least so far, there hasn't been a case where I'm like, oh, would be cool if I can use AI to do this, that, or the other. That's like a very practical way of looking at it. There's other ways, other thoughts I have on the topic, but that's one of them. It's just, and in reality what is happening, because I have like a good friend of mine, he's an art director at the studio, and he's saying that a big chunk of the team, you ask them to do simple tasks now, and because they have been so reliant on AI for the last 2 years, especially, that they can't, or like they freeze, they don't know how to do it anymore. And I'm like, but you've been doing it for, so I don't know, like it's for me as a tool. I, in my pipeline, at least so far, I haven't had the need or necessity or will or want to implement it so far.
Yeah, no, fair enough. Because as a useful tool as it is, there's a lot of limitations to it, and you have to be very precise with and intentional about the kind of models that you use and the prompts that you give if you are especially doing it for a job. Like typically, I like to use it for like doing quick fact checks. Like if I'm like
Mm,
making a claim with any of my interviews, I really don't like how Google ranks its searches, and so I'll usually use something like Perplexity, which
mm,
gives me access to like a range of models. So if I have like a coding question, I can ask Claude. If I need an image generated just to kind of visualize something, there's a different model that you can use. But I'm very not so trustworthy with like the way that current search engines work,
yeah.
because I know that they actively rank certain things based on their own personal interests. So I find it useful for that, or for getting like basic information for some kind of topic that I want to research, or background information on a person. But beyond
Mm,
that, like even music generation now, it's okay, but there's no amount of like fine tuning. You don't get access to all like the tracks that are used, and you can't like change their pitch or their volume. You just kind of get this finished product, and maybe in the future it'll get better. But even then, so as you said, you lose a certain part of your own capability if you constantly have to rely on a tool like this, because it's like, oh well, I mean, look, unless they're having like a power outage, in the server or something like that, then this tool is always going to be here, so why would I bother trying to learn anything technical, and it's a fairly
There's
easy trap to fall into.
to and yeah, I agree with what you're saying, and I can understand the side of user case that there are certain like people can make arguments or have valid arguments of certain using it in certain way, and it can help them, assist them, and have a more productive way of doing things, which I totally get. The I can break down my view on it in different ways. And again, like I'm specifically talking about generative AI. Um, First of all, like the legal side of things are very murky at best, I would say.
Hmm.
So whatever you're putting out there, first of all, you can have like an entire different conversation about ownership, about, copyright, about all of this stuff. And, if clients are paying certain amount of money for something and they realize that they actually don't own the copyright for it, that's, regardless if you wrote that I made the transfer of the copyright to that party because they bought it, it doesn't mean anything because you can't copyright the output of it. So there's like a legal concern to it. There's like an ethical in terms of data training and all of this shit associated with it. So there's a lot of baggage there. I understand that there's people who train their own models, and I've seen legitimately very interesting stuff with AI that is done in that way. Um, like you can look at it, or at least I can look at it from many different ways. But again, when I speak about people training their own models, for example, for creating visuals, let's say, or imagery or whatever, this is like a tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of the users. And yeah, like with arguments for or against AI that I've heard, and because like even with like Move It and like the group and whatever, like I speak a lot with other artists about the topic, and all the arguments for or against at the end of it all, like regardless of your argument, this is just a company trying to cut as many corners as they can and pay as little as they can and to make as much money as they can, which is nothing new. Like companies have been doing this for ages now. Like
Hmm.
as soon as they find a way to cut corners and screw artists out, they will take it because they have financial incentives to do it. You have it with record deals, you have it whatever. It exists everywhere. I can understand that it's nothing new, but it's yet another way to add to it and to do it on an even bigger scale that I have an issue with. So it's like, and that's the bottom line in a lot of ways. It's like yet another way to screw over artists and do it on an even bigger scale. So regardless of the arguments for or against, that's the core bottom line of it, to me at least. Um, so unless there's something that happened that can negate it or address it, and there's a bunch of lawsuits happening at the moment with, Disney and whatever, and some people are saying, oh, they're gonna just make a deal with the AI companies and all this shit, which, Disney is not like historically been great and fair to art. So I have probably, yeah, they'll end up making a deal with them. And the same with music, where you have companies like Suno, where the CEO is saying that nobody enjoys making music, so we're just, cutting that part out. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, do you hate like artists and music so much that you're making up statements like no one enjoys the process of making music anymore and it's like too time consuming or this and this and that and the other. I'm like, yeah, but not everyone needs to be a musician, you know? So it's like, yeah, like there's a lot of with AI you can poke at it from a million, especially generative AI, I should say. You can poke at it from a million different points, but all of those arguments are secondary to the main argument that it's like a big ass company screwing over artists yet again on a very large scale. So how can we address that instead?
Yeah, that really surprises me about the Suno CEO. I mean, it does and it doesn't, because I mean, I've always viewed these tools as just the next iteration of humanity's capabilities when it comes to technology. And even with those problems that you mentioned there, which are totally legitimate and should certainly be addressed, I think in the long term, at least the outlook that I have is that it's it's going to, at least I hope, uh, have the effect that just about every technological innovation does, where yes, there are certain industries that will die off and there's certain things that we will lose in the process, but there's a lot that we will gain as a result of it. And I'm hopeful that what we gain will be a net positive moving forward. It's hard to say that when the CEO himself comes out and says it's not really enjoyable to make music now, which is like, that is such a beyond ridiculous assertion. Has he been to a concert like recently where where you
Yeah,
have a
but that's the
musician
thing. Like,
that's actually enjoying the crowd, and you can tell that yes, it is their job, but like they love it.
but that's the main disconnect. Are any of the CEO of those companies people who actually like are they even artists or do they even have passion or interest in what the fuck they're involving themselves in? Like, does the whoever, like AI company of, Midjourney or whatever, did you ever have interest, like actual passion about image making before in any capacity or shape or form? With Suno, it's very obvious. Like the guy is literally saying no. So it's like, well, then I'm gonna be very harsh into questioning your motives behind it because it's clearly not about the actual discipline or the crafting or any of this shit. So yeah, this is where like I get a little bit yeah, like I lose patience and I'm not as yeah, like I'm not gonna handle it with gloves on type of deal, and I become more agitated because those people are saying some absurd shit, and this is not a random person saying it. This is the actual CEO.
Yeah, and I certainly share your sentiment there because I've even heard of this theory from people that have spoken to like insiders of that Silicon Valley AI scene, where, and I don't know to what extent this is true, but apparently some of the people that are in that scene, some of the higher ups, they have this philosophy that they want to bring about what they believe is going to be the next quote unquote god, or the closest thing that we can get to creating an artificial god. And they don't necessarily care in terms of like how many heads they're going to have to step on along the way or what they're going to have to sacrifice to do it. That it's like an ideological stance that they take. They just want to be around there for the inception of this thing, whatever it's going to be, and the creation of it. And regardless of like what it takes to get there, they're willing to do just about anything. And
But
when
even
I,
if you
yeah.
remove, if you remove the word God or whatever or any of that stuff, even if you say okay, none of that stuff is true, uh, the common thread is like ego. Like those are people with
Hmm.
insane ego. And again, you don't need to look at fiction or hypotheticals or whatever. You have the literal owner of the Suno, like the CEO of Suno, in video saying this shit. Like you don't need to fabricate anything. Like you have a guy in video saying this shit. And so the ego with those characters, also with, Midjourney and Sam and all of this shit, like you don't need to, you can just literally look at the words that they're saying. You can look at the interviews that they're making. You can look at the direction that they're going. You can look at the legal documents that the current, lawsuits are being held. Like with, if you go on Twitter, you can look up Carla Ortiz. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. She's one Carla with a K. She's been like, she's an amazing artist in her own right. She worked, you know, as a concept artist for. She's extremely successful and knowledgeable about digital art, and on Twitter especially from the early days, she's been a huge voice in terms of raising concerns about AI, but also showing like the actual lawsuits, procedures, and the legal documents and ins and outs about everything generative AI related. Um, so yeah, the information is there, basically. Everything is there. And it's not coming from random people. Like those are very well respected industry people who know what they're talking about and are passionate about art and crafting and the industry because it directly affects them and they're directly involved in it. So the motivations for her to speak out or speak up about those topics, there's no hidden agenda, there's no hidden catch. This is as transparent as honest as I would imagine and hope that you can get.
Yeah, and what the point that you make actually reminds me of an interview. It was a famous one right before OpenAI released their Sora model, where I think it was I don't remember if it was this lady, but no, I forget which one. But like there was a meme made about like just the face that she made when she was asked about their training model data that they used for the Sora model.
Hmm?
I'm gonna see if I can find it. Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
remember this
this
one.
one here. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or like yeah,
But
where
this one I'm saying,
they were
you
asked
don't
if they
need to
used YouTube
imagine or
videos.
fabricate. You don't need hypothetical. You don't need to imagine. It's all out there. And it's not random people. Like those are literally the people who are the head of it or have huge influence on shaping it. And you can hear them talk about their intention and motivation and logic behind it. So again, you can look at it from a million different way, and I'm not negating that it's all of AI or it's everything AI related. I can understand that. Of course, it's not because AI is a huge umbrella. But in terms of generative AI in for specific companies, like it's very clear. And if you start falling down the rabbit hole of arguments, it's like, no, the bottom line is like finding new ways to screw over artists to make more profit, more money out of them. And that's it basically. But it's done on a massive scale. It's not new. This has always been happening, and companies and studios keep finding new ways to screw over their artists, but this is on a massive scale, on a very big scale. And it's like it's not that the other shit is cool and it's fine with and this is a problem. No, not, all of it is shit, but this is like a scale that is a very scary scale and it's progressing in a very rapid pace.
Yeah, no, I certainly see what you mean. The one thing that does give me hope though is that uh, even with the layoffs and everything that happens in all these industries, whether it's animation or art in general or design, um, is that it also, as we like started in the beginning of this interview here, it gives artists a chance to build something of their own and not have to rely on working for a big studio like Disney, where now we're seeing kind of the not the resurgence, but like the age of independent creators um, get recognized in a way that the regular market just simply can't adapt to. I mean, just about every movie trailer that I see these days is a remake or a rehash or a remaster, because Hollywood is not keen on supporting ideas that are risky or don't have an existing IP. So it's a lot easier to just simply, re-release like the Naked Gun or I Know What You Did Last Summer. Like now they're like re-releasing that, which I don't. That movie is like was in the '90s. I'm pretty sure. Like I don't understand why they have to bring it back. Um, Meanwhile, you get a lot of indie creators that go to studios like A24 that still get their movies shown in big blockbuster cinemas, but it all started from like an independent movie that they made, and eventually somebody saw it on YouTube and it gets shared enough, and next thing you know, they're walking the red carpet.
Yeah, and I think like people are not dumb as well. Like that's when we're talking about like before like with clients and whatever, it's easier to say, oh, but clients are dumb and they don't know what they want and all of this shit. But people are not dumb. Like if you keep giving them shit and crap in terms of movies or media or whatever, over time they're gonna say, okay, well, like this is all bullshit. We don't want any of it, and we're gonna support something that, you know, has more passion, has more drive, has more inspiration to it. And this is why like the indie route is becoming more popular or is gaining traction for a while now, is because people are realizing that, you know, you don't need I don't need the like if I'm playing a video game, I don't need a game that is like 120 gigabytes of assets that are all 4K textures and whatever, but the story is shit and the actual gameplay is shit. The graphics are phenomenal versus an indie game that has an interesting story, has a lot of care and attention to details in terms of character development. It can be a game, it can be a movie, and whatever. Yeah, it's not the biggest budget, it's not the most refined visuals you'll ever see, but you're gonna enjoy playing it and you're gonna find value in whatever story or narrative is being delivered. And those, I think, are ones that are right now we're seeing more attention being placed on versus, you know, like the 20th re like iteration of a certain IP or something.
Yeah, I mean the one that mainly comes to mind right now, the one that I've been seeing is Peak, and
Yep.
the graphics for that game. Have you had a chance to play it?
No.
Oh, it's great. Highly recommend it if you got a friend or two that can play on PC. But the graphics are like very simple. You just have these cute little characters going up a mountain, and the whole point is to get to the top. Um, UI is very simple. There's like no nonsense to it. It was made by a small team of I think like 10 or so people. They all traveled to like I forget where, but they all like decided to lock in for like a month or so in this like Airbnb, come out with this game, and now I mean the player base is insane. The game's only been
Mm.
out for I don't even think like a month or so. Um, yeah, it looks like it dropped around the 16th of June, and now it's reaching 100,000 not like concurrent players. Like the amount of people that are playing at any given time is fluctuating between 30,000 and 100,000, which is
Mm.
incredible because then you'll hear about games like I think it was not Marathon, but there was a game made by Bungie that had all this hype, and the servers got shut down within a week, even though they had spent like hundreds of millions building it and had this huge team and all this attention paid to it. Meanwhile, like that completely flopped.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of those budgets are allocated to marketing as well. Like when you hear massive budgets of games or movies, especially like if you take out even the marketing budget, like it's a huge chunk, like just for marketing and for something that doesn't work. Like it's gonna fail eventually, or you know, if it's 1 week they open the servers and then turn it off, it's like it's an insane, yeah, resource investment into something that goes nowhere versus the indie projects or that are at a much slower, like smaller scale and not even comparable, but it's like people will support it and people will appreciate it, and that's the marketing. But this ties back, you know, like what we were talking earlier with architecture and all of this detour, and it's like what problems are we trying to solve? What value is being delivered? It's like at its core, you can really try to distill it into very simple questions like what problem is being solved or what problem is people are trying to solve and what value is being delivered.
Yeah, no, that's certainly a good way of of thinking about it because it's as you said, like people are not stupid.
Yeah,
If you keep shoveling the same kind of thing, like eventually they're gonna get tired of it. I mean, there's only so many Marvel movies that people can watch until they just get exhausted from it. Like I was all on board for when the first like couple movies came out because I was like, oh man, this is great. Like I grew up on these things. on these comics and all these stories, and it's great to finally see them come to the screen because in the early 2000s, like, yeah, you had a superhero movie every now and then, but it wasn't like this giant world building where they also have theme parks for it and all this like merchandise. It wasn't like a well like thought out plan like that. And now that they have this just massive conglomerate, like they've just been swallowing up, whether it's like 20th Century Fox or DC or any of these IPs, they just get bought up and recycled for the umpteenth time. And because they're playing to a global audience, they have to be able to create something that can also exist in the Chinese market, which means that they have
Yeah.
to edit the movie and cut certain things out, but that comes at a price of not actually being true to what the story is supposed to be. And it just comes out of this weird, diluted, I don't know, amalgamation of all these different thoughts and ideas that people had for the project. And it's rare that you see something that actually defies that kind of convention and makes a stand for itself. But those are the movies that we actually want to see. Those are the movies that will actually get people to think and actually enjoy something different.
Yeah, and like you have also like trends are a big like pitfall for a lot of those ideas, because if something is trendy, you will want to jump on the wagon and make more of it because people are asking for it. So you try to, have a supply for this demand. And in terms of trend, the risky part is you don't know how long it will last. So not every game needs to have a campaign of 60 plus hours. Not every movie needs to have like 10 movies of lore, and you need to watch like 3 movies before it to watch this movie because you won't get the story anymore. You can have exceptions. You can have movies that do it brilliantly and games that do have 80 hours campaign that are very successful, but that's not every game needs to follow this formula. You can have games that are 1 hour and people will love it because not everyone can spend 80 hours on a game. So trends is the tricky part, like trying to follow trends and trying to stay on top of trends. A lot of those businesses try to do that because they have incentive to do it, because this is where they think the demand is. But when it backfires, it's gonna backfire hard on those companies, which it did already.
Yeah, and just to pivot a little here, actually, I had this idea. Would you ever think of making a game based on all these themes and explorations that you've done around the topic of the mundane? Um, where like, I mean, the way that I see it is like you would just have like a daily routine that you do in a house, but as you said in the theme of that book there would be like certain underlying things that you would really have to look closer to in order to understand what's actually going on. But it's like you get up, you make breakfast, go out to the farm, then come back in and just do that. That would be an interesting
That's,
idea.
I mean, like never say never, but generally speaking, like, because I can give you a simpler example. Like, instead of saying, did you ever think about making a game? Did you ever think about animating it? Just having, instead of a still image, because you already did work. You already have a 3D thing. You already have it up and running, texture, light, why don't you make an animation? And for me, it's the same reason. Like, part of the charm for me for that specific project, and a huge part of why it works for me, it's this stillness, this very like frozen stillness quality that you can only get in an image. Once you move it, once you animate it, you lose that specific, very specific quality. And yeah, the same way that, again, like, because my main source of inspiration, it's with the book with James Joyce Dubliners. It's like he builds enough, there's always a tension in it. But once it reaches a certain level, he stops the story and moves to another. he never overshares, he never reveals the thing itself. And with animation, which is an even less interactive thing than a game, what you're proposing, it's like adding those endless possibilities of, how do you say it, not failure, but it's like yeah, it's too many probabilities, it's too many new aspects, whereas a still image has this quality that I really love, which is why I don't do animation most of the time. And for that project there's zero animation, it's all still images, because that quality is what is a huge part of a project.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can understand that because yeah, it's changing
It's
changing the
very
medium. Yeah.
it's very underwhelming. It's made to be underwhelming. Anytime I can think of an idea to make it more exciting, it defeats the purpose by default, because it's supposed to be mundane. Any time I add makes it more interesting in terms of excitement, engagement, whatever, that already defeats the purpose of the whole project. So this is like the thin line that I'm always, to a certain degree, either I'm this is why I'm saying some pieces are more successful than others, because it's a very thin line for me to walk. It's like, how much do I put in there? How much, you know, do I make it attention grabbing or whatever? Because it's meant to be like as mundane as possible. It's not supposed to be exciting.
Is that a hard thing to keep in mind as you make these pieces? Because I would imagine the human brain doesn't really enjoy feeling bored or mundane or trying to embody those feelings for an extended period of time.
For me personally, it's not, because I can see the layers under it. Because the mundane thing is just the coating, like the fresh paint on top of it is this feeling of mundane, like the first glance of it. But I can see the layers under it. So for me, it's interesting. It's an interesting project. But having said that, I can understand why for probably most people there's nothing, it's a boring project, or it's just and that's the duality where it exists. That's why I was saying it's a horrible project to spend 2 years dedicating yourself to it, or because anything that is like, especially now with, like, not now but for a while, like in terms of attention economy and all of this shit, and like make stories, make it interactive, make this, make that to get more attention, be louder, be this, be that. This is like the opposite way of doing it, because
Mm-hmm.
it's not even entertaining any of those techniques. And it's not to say those techniques are bad, those techniques work, especially with algorithm and all of this shit, but it's like, this is just its own thing. And if it, the reality is like anything else is secondary, like attention or whatever. It's not, the intentions are very different behind this project.
Understood. Yeah. No, I can understand that. That's fair enough. Yeah. For you, that actually sees the behind the scenes and the idea behind it. It's not as mundane. And as you said, it's not you don't just jump into the software blindly. You already have an idea and whatnot. So the work itself is just nonstop, just trying to make that vision come to life.
Yeah, and this is what makes it interesting. Otherwise, there's literally no reason why I should continue this project. I should have maybe made one image and then gave it up. But I generally find something that for me it's interesting to dive deeper into it. This is why I keep making new pieces for it. Because every time I'm like, I think that's the final piece. I'm like, there's a new idea. There's a new beginning of an idea that is starting to take shape or form, and it's then trying to work it out and figure out what it can be and if it's worth doing or not. If it's not, then there's another idea around the corner, and maybe this one could be interesting to try and flesh it out and really have it fully developed. Otherwise, there's no point behind any of it. Like it's not making something for the sake of making something.
Yeah, and as you said, it's because it doesn't cater to that to the attention economy. There's a certain quality that you get uh, with these pieces because as an observer, it immediately just kind of communicates to you that uh, this isn't trying to game some algorithm. It's not trying to gain like the most attention, and it implies that there is something richer, something more refined underneath it. Because like whenever I
Yeah, but
encounter any kind of media these days, like a part of me thinks, okay, well, how much of the calculation that went into making this was based on some kind of quota that you're trying to hit or some kind of format that is simply popular versus your own original intentions and ideas, which I find are typically more valuable to me than whatever the algorithm thinks.
this is why I have client work. This is why it's a completely separate thing, because I can alleviate the financial responsibility or burden from that side of thing. Like with the mundane or with the paintings or whatever, there's no financial burden on them because the client work is what's paying the bills. So this is what's taking part of that side of thing. Here it's just creating for myself in the most self-indulgent way possibly. But the only reason I can do that is twofold. A, there's the client project, and B is like this internal like something from within that wants to pursue it, wants to keep creating at it. This is what, but yeah, like if it had financial burden, I don't think this project definitely would exist, for example.
Yeah, no, I can certainly see that. Um,
So I
and
can, yeah, I can give it, this, yeah, the self-indulgent, like it doesn't need to be all of those things, because it doesn't have to. Otherwise, it wouldn't exist. And I can understand, like, this is why I'm saying, like, I can understand why if you're doing a series and you have a financial burden reliant on it, of course you will need to utilize tools available to you to make it more algorithmic friendly, to make it more to get more eyes on it, to have it more visible. But that project just by the title alone shoots everything in the foot.
yeah, and I'd be interested to see what you come up with in the future, however long that certainly does take you. I feel like this is kind of it's a I think there's like a never-ending source of inspiration to play around with this idea.
Yeah, with this, and there's no pressure. That's the thing also. Like I
That too.
can, that's the main thing. That's the only way I'm able to do it is that there's no pressure on it. So I can spend the next 8 months not doing anything with that project, just letting ideas grow. And after 8 months, maybe do a piece and then abandon it for another 4 months and then do one piece. And then, there's that type of freedom or that type of, yeah, freedom for lack of a better word. There's no pressure on it. It doesn't have to be anything. It just is what it is for, whatever time or period it's happening. And then on to the next. Because, yeah, like if you look at the paintings or whatever, I also don't hold on too much to stuff like with the paintings, especially because, I do something, I put it out there, I move on to the next. It's not that it doesn't have meaning for me or it doesn't have value, but it's like just the act of making it for me at least is enough or was enough at that time when I make something else and then move to something else, move to something else. And there's always a common thread to them, but yeah, like I don't hold dear to too much to the things that I make.
Yeah, that's definitely a good way of going about it. Being free and unconstrained with the creative process and not letting it be clouded by deadlines or some kind of external pressure.
No, even worse, like the continuity. Like you have this trend for like I don't know who started that. So it's probably a very old thing, but you need to have like one style or one recognizable style or
Hmm.
whatever it is. And yeah, sure, some people have that naturally. For me, I'm already switching between different mediums, so that's already out of the window. And so, but again, like because it's personal projects, those are not commercial projects. Like I don't have that pressure of they need to be this or they need to be that or they need to play by those rules because they're not. It's not organic to them, and that's the only way I'm able to do them for so long is because I keep for me very interesting. It's interesting to make. Otherwise, there's no reason to make them or pursue them. But they don't need to conform to a certain umbrella of way of doing things, especially with like having like an aesthetic or a recognizable style or all thing. It happens by default. You will get there eventually. You will have a certain vocabulary or language that is recognizable and perhaps unique as well to you.
Yeah, that's very well thought out. Right on. Well, I was just gonna say we're reaching the 2.5 hour mark there. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover before we close up here?
No, I think that's about it. That's as much as I can go on without coffee or a cigarette.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So in terms of socials, people can mostly find you on Twitter there at Sombre.
Twitter is horrible for art. I'm just gonna put it out there. If
Oh
you
yeah.
if you want to find, yeah, because there's no way to organize or to show the shit that you're doing in a way that makes sense. The best way to, if anyone is interested in seeing the stuff that I do, the best way to have an efficient way of seeing shit is sadly through Instagram. That's the easiest way to get like a bird eye view of everything because Twitter it's just a mess, I would say. So yeah, either on Instagram or on my website. But those are the main two places I would say.
Yeah, and that'll be idiopathic work.work.
Yeah,
People can find all your stuff there, and yeah, also check out the link tree. It has everything there. So yeah, listen, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come on the show. I really appreciate you and hearing your different perspectives. I've learned quite a bit about it, and I'll certainly add those books to my reading list, and I'll let you know how that goes when I have my hand at them.
don't blame me for any of it, just for the record. This is your doing. This is not me forcing anything.
No, I get it. I'm Russian, so I'm well familiar with with authors and complicated themes and having to reread works. So I'm sure
Yeah,
I'll be able to take a crack at it.
go for it. Enjoy it, have fun. That's the main thing. As long as you can have fun during it, then it's all good.
That's right. That's right. And yeah. Thanks again for joining. Don't know when we'll be on next, but we'll be posting everything on the socials. So thank you to everyone for tuning in, and have yourself a lovely day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.